and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And joining me, as always, he might be a fallen angel, but to me, he just looks like a giant rock monster. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
It's great. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling really good with the rocks and the asymmetry. It's comfortable, and I enjoy being like this, and I hope that I never change.
Well, good. I'm sure you won't ever change.
Good.
This week on the show, our series Deconstructing the Films of Darren Aronofsky continues with the director's sixth film, 2014's Noah. This, Matt, was one I was looking forward to. I had thought that I had seen this movie, but I don't think I ever had. I think I just vaguely knew about it because people talked about the Bible movie that treated itself like fantasy myth.
Right.
And so I knew it was the Bible movie with the giant rock monsters in it. But I had never seen it myself, actually. So I'm very happy and excited to talk to you about this new movie for me. I think it was new for you as well, right?
I think I had seen it, but I'd probably seen it sort of half paying attention due to when this came out, based on the way time works, it must have been like when I had a literal baby at home. Yeah. And thus probably was watching it because you had to be really quiet in the house. And so you had this movie on with subtitles on.
Sure.
And you were just being very still and quiet because it was something to do.
Fair. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I think this is going to be a fun conversation. One of the ones that I was most looking forward to. And I can't wait. We're also this week going to talk about the movie industry. So surprisingly, it's doing real bad, Matt. Things are not good. We left it alone for a little bit. We didn't talk about the business of movies, and while we were away, everything went to shit. So
yeah, it's because we took our eye off the ball, and
we did. It's all our fault. I feel so bad. But man, it's gonna be a good episode. I'm glad to have you back, Matt. We missed you last week.
Oh, thank you.
I was forced to talk about EverQuest with someone that wasn't you because you weren't here.
Yeah, so I got that you were getting your revenge on me for the time that I had a conversation about EverQuest with Daniel without inviting you, and I just want you to know that fair play.
Good. Let that be a lesson to you. Never let it happen again, and we won't have this problem.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
All right, Matt, let's get into it. Let's talk all about Darren Aronofsky's Noah.
Noah. What did he say?
He's going to destroy the world.
My father said that one day, if man continued in his ways, the Creator would annihilate this world.
Can it not be averted?
He speaks to you. You must trust that he speaks in a way that you can understand.
I saw water. Death by water. And I saw new life. A great flood is coming. We build a vessel to survive the storm. We build an ark.
Mama! What is it? What? Them!
What do you want? You don't know your king. There isn't anything for you here.
I have men at my back, and you stand alone and defy me?
I'm not alone.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
Noah is chosen by God to undertake a momentous mission before an apocalyptic flood cleanses the world.
This movie was written by Mr. Darren Aronofsky and Ari Handel. It is the first film written by Aronofsky since The Fountain. Like we talked about, he stepped away from the writing duties for a couple movies, a couple very, very well-liked movies. And then he came back to this movie, which you won't believe it, Matt, not a very well-liked movie.
Yeah, I seem to remember the people not finding it to be the best of his oeuvre.
Yeah. Film, of course, directed by Darren Aronofsky. It stars Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, Anthony Hopkins, and Emma Watson. Some really big names on this one, man. They really threw everything at this movie. And what did you think of it, Matt? What did you think of Noah?
I admire Aronofsky's big swings, even if they're misses. I I think my number one problem with the movie is it is simply too long.
Yes.
And drags and is a bit boring. But like within this movie, which is too long, there is a bunch of really cool stuff. I thought the visuals were a highlight for me. I mean, even in this day and age where we're just spoiled with visuals, I thought the creativity of the visuals was a delight.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think we're going to go through various things, what worked for us, what didn't work for us. But I want to preface all of that with just saying, like, I love that he does stuff like this. Like, even if a thing doesn't work for me, I'm glad that he tried it. You know,
Yeah.
I'm glad that he made something kind of weird and personal and, you know, self-indulgent maybe a little, but I'd rather he do that than make something, you know, just purely straightforwardly like commercial, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think this is Aronofsky's biggest film so far, $125 million budget. This long way from Pi, our guy is now. Like we said, huge movie, huge stars in this movie, big marketing push, big film. Ultimately unsuccessful, I think. I kind of agree with you. I think this movie has a lot of problems, but I really like it, actually. And I think I had this really interesting thing that happened to me with this movie, Matt, where, you know, I don't think I've ever had as big of a turnaround on a movie mid-movie as I had watching this movie. Like normally, like if I have a flip-flop on a movie, it'll be like I'll finish the movie, feel a certain way, and then the more I think about it over time, I'll be like, actually, and then I'll kind of reverse my opinion on it. This one was right in the middle of the movie, because up until about the halfway point, I was not liking this movie at all. I was like, the rock dudes are cool. I like this idea of the Bible as fantasy world. I like it conceptually, but I am not vibing with this movie at all. I did not think Russell Crowe's Noah was a very compelling character. I did not think any of the drama was done very well. I thought the performances were very, very strange. I just thought nothing was working in this movie. It was really dragging. And then a thing happens, Matt, which is the flood comes. And I remember the exact moment the movie started getting me. And it's when the flood has happened, everyone's on the ark, and Noah is sitting there, and we are hearing the screams of the dying people surrounding the ark as they're like desperately trying to grab onto the ark and hold on. And these people are screaming in pain and fear, and Noah is just sitting there stone-faced. And everyone around him is like, please, you have to help these people. They're not all soldiers. There's innocent people out there. You have to help them. And he's just like, no.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, fuck yeah. I am suddenly vibing with this movie. I am suddenly really fascinated with what this movie is doing. And essentially, the entire second half of the movie is Noah is a crazy psychopath, actually. And it turns out the antagonist of the film,
yeah,
where the climax of the movie is Noah gonna stab this newborn baby in the face? Maybe. Right. Awesome stuff. And I lament that it took so long to get there. But I thought it was really, really fun stuff at the end.
Yeah, it's like they were trying to take elements from like the Moses story or the Abraham and Isaac sacrifice story and sort of pastiche them into this, because I don't think most of these elements happen in the Noah story specifically. I mean, I could be off base.
I mean, the Emma Watson character was completely invented for this, not in the Bible at all.
Right. And I kind of like you, it's like the drama becomes much more interesting at that point. Although I will say it sort of becomes a totally different movie. Like,
yeah,
it's just is a totally different story because, you know, he's this like totally unburdened, unconflicted sort of person for most of the movie. And then I don't know, that's not quite entirely fair. I think it's actually the character is not unburdened. It's that Russell Crowe is just a skosh too stoic and unflappable.
I was forced to conclude that. I was forced to conclude that the read we're supposed to be having the whole time is that Noah is this guy filled with doubts about everything that's happening and yeah, the biggest problem is we just don't get that in the first half of the movie. It's like, that's why I thought this character was so boring. I was like, it doesn't seem like he's doubting this at all. It's like, God told me to do this, I'm going to do it. Yeah, whatever. There's no conflict here. There's nothing. And then slowly there becomes some internal conflict with him as he like kind of turns nuts. And like, I mean, basically what this movie does is it takes the flood myth and says, okay, but like, what would it be like to be alive during that?
Yeah.
And it would be fucking crazy, actually.
Yeah.
So, and it just dives into that in the greatest way possible. But for some reason, it takes so long to get there. It's just like, we have to do all this other stuff and like big battle scenes, which are cool in that, like, there's a big battle scene in the middle of a movie about Noah's Ark, but man, it just doesn't get to the meat until so late in the film.
Yeah, my notes for Aronofsky consistently is just like, you don't need battle scenes. That's not your forte. It's not even really that cool. Like the fallen angel things were cool, but I didn't need to see them do a battle. And in fact,
they were cool abstractly. Yeah.
They're cool abstractly, and I almost feel like they were overexposed. Like the cool stuff about the world, I thought, like, and like the world building, I guess you could say, is that you've got these, cool, grotesque fallen angel dudes who are clearly like either, I don't think they're literally stop motion, but they're done I think they're CGI, but they're CGI in a way that looks kind of stop motion and kind of ethereal, which I loved. I love that kind of stuff. Every once in a while you run into an animal of some kind, or on the ship when the guy is slaughtering the animals, all the animals are like these weird piglets, like just creatures, and they look weird and fun and like creative fun, not I don't know, there's a specific kind of weird that I love, and this movie just had it in spades. Like that was some of my favorite stuff. I think along the lines of what you were saying a second ago, like the setting is a very fun setting to think about, because it's like you're like the 6th generation of human in this setting, and that kind of means, and it kind of seriously explores the idea of like you're kind of finding out what human nature is, because it's evolving in real time, and we're like, oh shit, this sucks, like humans suck actually, and I don't like this, and this is also a world where like God, as portrayed both in the Bible and of course in the movie, is like completely detached and basically has been mad about everything that's happened since he created the world. Just every single basically the story is he created the world and it was good, and then as soon as he created humans, just like it's a series of us making horrible mistakes and him getting really pissed off. And that's the world that these characters live in. So Russell Crowe's character is like, Noah is like seriously grappling with this idea of like, okay, he's the creator, but he hates us because we suck. And like, but I still owe him a sort of duty. But then it's like, how far does that duty go, even if he's like a godly, obedient man? And I thought it was like a genuinely interesting exploration of the idea of human nature in that particular way.
I haven't seen it quite told this way before, which is I mean, my favorite part about it, because I think the flood myth is such a fascinating story in and of itself, because you have this supposedly benevolent creator that has decided essentially to kill everyone and like, I mean, just to go back to the screaming and the crying again, like to just shoot that shot, to cut to this wide shot where the ark is rolling by a rock with like the last remnants of humanity desperately clinging to it as they scream and wail and cry, was just like, oh, holy shit. I had never seen this depicted this way. I had never thought about it in this way. Like, we of course learned the Noah's Ark story in Sunday school, and it's told in the cute kitty way, which is like two of every animal, la da 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 da, and then like, but like in reality, this was God going like, okay, fuck this, I'm done. I just fucked up. I gotta throw it all away and start over, and I'm gonna do it in like the most violent way possible. But Noah, you get to be the one to survive, and like the immense amount of like survivor's guilt and general guilt and indecision and uncertainty that must put on a human being, that it's just like, okay, you're up, build this thing for me, and all these people are going to want to come on it, but you can't let them because they're all bad. And he's witness to the badness of humanity, right? Like his kind of origin story in how the movie posits it is he watches his father murdered in front of his eyes.
Yeah.
And so like he doesn't have a good view on humanity either. And it's like the doubt of, is this coming from me? Is this coming from my own internal distrust, or is it coming from the creator? Which by the way, I like that they never called him God. I think this is trying to distance itself from, like, obviously it's a Christian, it's an Abrahamic myth, right?
Right.
But they are trying to, I think, distance ourselves from those words to create kind of a world of its own.
Yeah, which I think is, I mean, I thought it was smart just for the sake of world building, but also sort of at a meta level, knowing that you're releasing this movie into, the US market. It's like you literally want to be sure to clarify to your audience, like, this, like, Jesus ain't in this movie. This is not the God that you're used to thinking about.
Yeah.
This is basically a different character, literary wise. And I think they do a good job with all that.
Yeah. I will say I am surprised by how much of the plot of this film pivots on the central idea of, but Dad, if God kills everyone, who am I gonna fuck?
Yeah.
Because that's pretty much what everyone is concerned with.
Yeah.
Is the Ham, Noah's son, is just like, there's no one for me to fuck. You promised me a wife. Yeah. You bastard. I'm going to turn evil now and eat animal flesh.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like I said a minute ago, I really did think it was an interesting exploration of human nature, because it's like the individual characters in the movie are all acting out of like very fundamentally understandable motives, none of which are like, I'm the villain. Like, even the villain isn't like cackling evil. He's just like, God gave us the world and told us to have dominion over it. He literally said that. Like, that's
I love that the things he's saying, the arguments he's making are just literally just from the Bible.
Yeah. Exactly, right? Like that's so much more interesting to me than if it were he's just evil. He's just an evil man. It's like, no, everyone is behaving rationally and basically understandably, including Noah and including his family, and like, because you can put yourself in his family's position where you're like, this sucks. Yeah. This is horrible. And then you can put yourself in Noah's position where you're like, God spared literally just me and my family for this task. This is like the most weight that has ever been put on a person. And I mean, like, that's probably the best element of Russell Crowe's performance, is the parts where he's just like breaking down under the pressure of it, actually.
Yeah.
And, like, not being stoic, but actually just kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
That's, again, too long and slow, but like all the stuff we're talking about is in there, and it's really good when it kind of lands.
I agree. I mean, the Tubal Cain character was perfect. I love the quote he said about, like, the creator doesn't care about us. We're cursed to struggle by the sweat of our brow to survive. Like, damned if I don't do everything I possibly can to do just that. And it's like, yeah, that's a good point, man. Yeah. Actually, it's like, you, the descendant of Cain, didn't do anything. Like, you didn't do the original sin. You didn't do the first murder, but you are being punished for these sins. And it's like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just like chill and suffer and die? Well, you're supposed to live like Noah, the argument is, but like, I totally get the argument. It's like, no, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to survive. Like, people are starving, people are dying. I love actually the visuals of this. Like, not just the rock monsters, but like the way it depicts the world as this rotting, dying place, that there's just like fields of ash and death, and there's like nothing. There's no animals, just no trees. It's like one little flower poking out of the ground is like a shocking thing that for one of Noah's kids to see. Like, it's the world is rotting and dead, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? I have to live. I have to I have to eat. Like, can you really chastise me for eating animals? Like, what else is there?
Yeah. Just to riff on your comment about the world looking great, I love the repeated motif of, I don't know if motif's quite the right word, the technique, I guess, of like not gosh, what's the word for this? It's like a series of still images being played, like flickering through them, in fast motion, but they're not actually still images. They're like it's like, so there's a few times it happens. One of which is the creation of the Earth sequence, which was amazing. And I forgot all about that sequence somehow. Maybe I like walked out of the room for that, but I thought that was really great.
I loved it. Yeah.
I love the detail of it. I don't know if you noticed, but like the Earth is a molten ball and like a big asteroid hits it and knocks a bunch of debris off of it. And then like, as you're zooming into the Earth, you see the debris coalesce into the moon in the background.
Yeah.
And then, and like, yeah, that was great. And the sequence where like you're following this rivulet of water that goes down the landscape. There's maybe one or two more of those, I don't remember, but like I thought it was very creative, worked really well, added into this kind of otherworldly feel of the whole movie. And that's one thing I love about Aronofsky is he does these weird things you've never seen before, and he just goes all the way, and it works so well. I love it.
The director of photography on this movie was a man named Matthew Libatique, who I believe has been his cinematographer on like every single one of his movies. Pi, Requiem, Black Swan, maybe not one of them, but all, like basically all his movies he's been the DP, and obviously they work well together, and yeah, he achieves really cool stuff like that here. I agree.
We talk about the performances maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Russell Crowe is like a tale of two movies, and I feel like, Matt, you know, we've watched a lot of Russell Crowe performances, especially when he's working with Ridley Scott, and I feel like I can tell when Russell Crowe doesn't like a script, because he like Russell Crowe phoning it in to me is very obvious, and I feel like honestly, I feel like he was so bored by the script until the halfway point. Like that's how I feel, is because I just really do not like this first half performance at all. Like he's doing his kind of whisper talking that just does not work for me at all. And then like, yeah, it's like a switch flips, and it's like suddenly it's like, I mean, I actually saw a quote from him in this movie where people were talking about, you know, his performance, and he's like, yeah, of course I had to play it as this way. It's like, this is a guy who watched every single human being on the planet die and did nothing. It's like, of course I'm going to play him this way. And I was like, yeah, but you didn't do that until the second part of the movie. So I pretty mixed on his performance overall. I think he nails, like, it's kind of wild the number of looks he goes through, like in this movie. Like he gets a lot of really key haircuts that help drive and reinforce the ongoing insanity as he gets closer and closer to the climax. Also, like, unrelated, but the costume design in this movie was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, that I honestly liked that too. I'm
pretty sure at one point Russell Crowe was just wearing a t-shirt and jeans. Like it really looked to me one time like one of his outfits. Like, are those jeans?
Maybe so. I mean, I think there was like a jean jacket type thing going on at one point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I mean, I think what I like about it, I guess, is like it really does feel like this other world that existed and then was completely washed away, and there's like nothing left of it. Which you know, I don't know. I'm a sucker for like this general sort of thing where it's like, what if the world like used to be really different and we just don't even know? I just like that. I find it fun. Yeah.
What about the other performances, though? I mean, honestly, like, I feel kind of about just about all of them.
I thought they were, I think, all pretty bad. I think the villain was fun. I think he did fine. I forget his name. The actor, I forget his name.
His name is Ray Winston.
Winston, yeah. I like him.
He always kind of plays the same character in everything he's in, but he's very good at that character.
Yeah, and I think there was like some nuance and depth to it, and I appreciated that. But I thought everyone else was quite bad. Like even Jennifer Connelly, Jennifer Connelly, I think is legitimately great, but her, like in this movie, it's very uneven. It's like there are some scenes that I thought were great, and some scenes that I thought were bad. I thought Emma Watson was pretty bad, and I'll just say that up front.
I just like I feel like Emma Watson doesn't get anything to do really. She has some key scenes. Like, I guess she has the key scene where the theme of the movie is being explained to Noah. And yeah, I mean, I guess I just, yeah, I like Emma Watson. I think she's a pretty good actress. I've seen her in some stuff I really, really love. A movie called The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I think she's excellent in. But I just don't think she's given a lot to do here other than like cry and be scared. And I think that's the same with Jennifer Connelly. Like, I think there are moments in this where you like see the burden of being the wife of Noah. And like just imagining your husband comes to you and says like, oh, so God talked to me and turns out we're all going to die. We're going to be spared, but just for a little while. And then we're all going to die too. So just, deal with that.
Yeah.
I think she handles some of those moments really well. Like I actually really like when she went and ran to talk to Methuselah. I think, like, I guess when she has stuff to do, like active stuff to do, like I think she works well. But most of it, she's just kind of forced to just sit back and look disapprovingly, and not my favorite.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the Emma Watson thing, like. Interestingly, another Jennifer Connelly, a related film, but in The Rocketeer, when the director is telling the character the trick to acting is not acting like you're acting, that's always the problem with Emma Watson.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
but and then like weirdly that like one of the two brothers I think is fine, right? As Ham is like fine basically.
Yeah, that's Logan Lerman who plays Ham. Yeah,
and then Shem is just like hot guy,
a non-entity in this movie.
Complete non-entity, which is interesting, right? It's like it's almost like they casted him to be a non-entity. It was like, all right, Ham is like the real character, so let's like cast him really carefully, and then we just want like a very typically hot dude for him to be jealous of, to be his brother, and this guy is not going to do anything in the whole movie, and that's kind of it, the end.
Yeah, he does. I mean, Ham is the only one that, like, they basically were kind of backing into the Noah gets drunk and sons see him story. But I don't like the Ham stuff didn't really work for me either. Like I guess, by the way, Ham has like a whole lot of children, by the way. So like, don't worry, he gets to fuck. Don't worry. Like,
okay, good.
I don't know where he finds a woman, but he does.
It's one of his nieces, I guess.
Like, probably, yeah. I did, but I know why. But like the fact that Emma Watson is calling Noah father the entire time, and also like railing her brother, like I just. At different times, right? But that felt a little weird to me.
Yeah, that's always been one of the, I mean, I just think it's funny what you said earlier about like the way we're all taught the Noah's Ark story is it's almost like wrong to be like, yeah, this is the story of how Noah was this man and he saved all the animals and 2 by 2, and it's always like a sunny picture of like a smiling man, and it's like, no, God killed everyone and then he made them repopulate from a single family.
Yeah, from like 5 people. Yeah.
That's the story, actually. Like if you're sitting there and you're treating this as a story to break for the purpose of building a film out of it, that's the story right there. Like the severely messed up nature of this situation and like the position these characters are being put in. So in that regard, I think the movie did a good job. Like it took, I was only half joking when you and I were chatting about this earlier. And I was like, in some other world, there's a whole genre of films, which is like films that take place in a biblical setting, but actually just play it extremely straight and actually like seriously grapple with the ideas in the stories.
Yeah.
Which I guess maybe that it's not that doesn't exist at all, but it's just like every instance of that is sort of either the Passion of the Christ or some version of the Moses story, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the Moses stories are often not successful in that way specifically.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing about this movie is like everybody knows the Noah story, everybody. And so like you look at the story and you go, okay, Aronofsky wants to do this, but he's going to be like, I am going to do something different with it. I'm going to take it straightforward. I'm going to make it myth. I'm going to have magic rocks, and like the skin of the original snake is going to be like an artifact of power that the sons of Adam and Eve like pass on to themselves or something. Methuselah is going to be here with his golden sword or fire sword, played by Anthony Hopkins, which, by the way, I didn't know Anthony Hopkins was in this movie. And like, I remember the wide scene where they introduced Methuselah, and I just involuntarily said in my head Anthony Hopkins, like before you could even tell it was. So it's like, of course the wise old grandfather is getting played by Anthony Hopkins. But like, I think it almost, I really feel like tries to have its cake and eat it too, in that it tries to tell the straightforward Noah story and hit all the beats we know. And then it also tries to be like, but isn't this kind of crazy? But also I want you to be awed by it and have the good, comforting Noah parts of it. But also, isn't this kind of crazy? Like, I think if you wanted to tell a story that is kind of interrogating the insanity of the God of the world murdering his entire creation, like making the creation so straightforwardly bad is not the way to go. Like, I think the way the movie depicts the sons of Cain as just like monsters the entire time. And I know they're like one-offs, like that, the one girl that Ham finds, like there are one-off, but like every time we see them, they're depicted as the evil bad guys that like we don't have. It's like it's a movie flips a switch halfway through and says, oh no, you're supposed to have sympathy for these people. And it's like, well, wait a minute, why didn't you show them as sympathetic then? Like why didn't you work towards this at all and see them as just suffering people, not horrible monsters that are eating animal, like, you know, like it just feels like it wants to play that straight and to the point, which makes sense, because if we're just adapting the biblical story, like, you know, this is the first murder, the Cain, the first murderer, and he was marked by God, and all his descendants were, and yada yada yada. Like, it makes sense to play it that way, but then we don't also feel pity for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess what I'll say about that is just, it does seem reasonable to me that you would feel some kind of human compassion when you see suffering, even if you know that the people suffering are, you know, sinners, right?
Sure.
Yeah, because I just, like, I actually think this is a thing that happens in the Bible a few times, actually. Well, at least twice. Like, because the second time being Sodom and Gomorrah, where, you know, it's like the idea is like, we're gonna, you know, that your one family is allowed to leave, because the entire city is just full of sin. Everyone is an unredeemable sinner, and the specific thing here I think that's relevant is like, don't look back, because like looking back is this, I don't, you know, the text doesn't say this, but my interpretation is like, looking back to witness the destruction is like you're second guessing me and my choice and my decision that these people are all sinners who deserve to die, and you're showing them mercy. And I've decided that they're all sinners, they deserve to die, they deserve no mercy. And then Lot's wife does turn back to witness the destruction and is punished and is killed for that, right? So it's like, yeah, very clearly, like the morality here is very clear, and it's actually a very non-Christian morality, because it's very specifically like, we do not forgive sinners. Sinners are disappointments who deserve to die. Mm-hmm. That's like quite explicit in, I think, both of these stories, like both the Sodom and Gomorrah story and this story. But like even the Bible stories, even those two stories, I think, acknowledge like, but that's really hard to do. Like, it's really hard to just watch a bunch of people die, or at least this movie is taking that approach. I don't know. I think it's really interesting. I think it's an interesting thing to address.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I guess I just feel like the language of storytelling, like if we're gonna go that route, like give me more of a reason to care. And you're absolutely right. I did still feel sympathy for these people. Obviously, like the part, like I don't think you can listen to people screaming in fear and terror and not feel something, right? But I just feel like if we're going to try to complicate the arc story and bring in kind of these kind of fundamental questions about, I guess, God and what kind of person would Noah have to have been to do these kind of things, I just felt like we should get into it a little more. And it felt like the movie was afraid to like fully, because essentially the conclusion at the end of the movie is like, no, yeah, these people were like super bad and they did actually all deserve to die, but like humanity as a whole is not inherently evil. And there's still like an interesting, I again, it's been so long since I read the Noah story. I don't remember if the part of, and we're all gonna die too, and if you have daughters, I'm gonna murder them and we'll be the last people, and God actually lets Noah decide the future of humanity. I don't think that's true. Like the go be fruitful and multiply, the thing he says at the very end of the movie is I don't think Noah says that, right? I think that's God saying that to Noah and people. Is like, so
yeah, I think so.
So I think that was invented for this movie, and I like it, but I just feel like I just feel like it wants us to, like, the moral of the story, the Noah story, is that if you're really bad, if you're don't be really bad, because if you're really, 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 really bad, then you're all gonna die. So remember that. Always remember that, kids. If you're super bad, God will kill us all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Well, just I agree. Like, I don't think the movie quite succeeds in fully tackling the subject matter of like, okay, but actually though, like, what even is the right thing to do in a situation where you realize that this is the God of your world, who and this is how he is, and this is how he's going to behave. He's like an abusive, horrible father who doesn't really care about you. And like I sometimes think in watching stories like this about when I was a kid and I would play games like either Creatures or The Sims, and or you know, there was a variety of sort of like artificial life or sort of like society simulator games that were popular in like the late 90s, early 2000s. That, and I really liked those games. And I sometimes think about how like sometimes you would like set up a situation in those games and then you would get bored and then you would just like torture everyone to death. and that was a pretty common way of playing. Like, I don't even feel like ashamed at admitting it, even though it's so fucked up, because like that's how most people ended up interacting with the games, is like you lock everyone in the house and then start a fire, and like it's just more fun than the way the game is supposed to be played. And I think about that a lot when I'm like, especially in some of these Old Testament stories where it feels like that's the character of God in the story, is he's like bored and disappointed with how things are going and he starts screwing with things, and that's like textually there. Like, I'm not just I'm not making this up. So for the characters to just be like, it's fine, he's God, so it's fine. I'm just kind of like, I mean, and I get that it comes down to personal preference, because I'm just like, I don't find that to be a satisfying way of interacting with the subject matter. But I guess a different person could say like, he's God, it is what it is. Like, what he says is right is morally right. That's how morality works. Like, that's a way to think about morality. That's not the way I happen to think about morality, but
well, especially in the way that this movie chooses to depict how God's orders to Noah come down, right? Like, the movie depicts it very loosely, right? Where it's like there's not any specific dialogue or text that says, hey, you need to build it. Like in the story of Noah, like, I'm pretty sure he receives the orders of like how many cubits the ark needs to be, and like it really gets down to the nitty gritty details of how he's supposed to build this thing, what it's going to look like, that kind of things. And that's not the way the movie chooses to do it. And I think by doing it that way, it introduces the idea of doubt and the idea of how much of this is coming from the will of God and how much of this is coming from Noah himself, and that introduces his uncertainty, and I think that's really cool. But then, because we don't get any kind of definitive answer like that, wrestling with what the ultimate message of the movie is a little difficult, because essentially the argument by the movie through the Emma Watson character is, like, Noah, like, I think Noah at one point says, like, I was chosen for this because I'm the one that, like, would get it done. Like, I would listen, I would follow God, I would follow through, even as he asked me to do the most horrible thing imaginable, which is take my newborn grandchild and stab it in the face. I am the only person capable of seeing this task through to the end, because I am entirely loyal to my creator. And it throws that for a lurch by being like, no, I'm going to disobey what I thought was the order. And by making that, like, not explicitly the order, you're just like, okay, but what does God want in the context of the actual story then? Like, I guess you could say it's what Emma Watson says, right? But, like, I don't know. Like, did God say, hey, you should kill all the people? Or did Noah just decide that on his own? Like, because at that point in the movie, Noah is being depicted, the way Russell Crowe is playing him, the way he's costumed, the way the movie's shooting him, as kind of unhinged and insane.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I just don't know what to think about that. I think it's really interesting and really cool, but ultimately, like, this is why, like there's, as you said, there's so many fun things in this movie, but ultimately it doesn't work for me, because I am left with this level of uncertainty that makes me go, okay, so, but, like, what are we doing at the end of this thing?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I agree. I think you've helped me kind of sharpen something, because, like, I think the last, like, moment of the movie is the part that works the worst, like the least, because it's basically like giving a blessing to the next generation, and, like, this holy light of God is, like, pulsing in the sky as they do their prayer, their lineage tradition, and it's a clear, like, film language sign of, like, God approves of this. This is all what he wanted to happen, actually.
Yeah.
And I agree, where you're stepping back and you're like, did he, like he really kind of just screwed with Noah pretty bad, for the, or just didn't give him enough information to actually know this. And like, I think it would have, I don't know if it would have been, like, a better movie, but it would have been more interesting to me if it ended more ambiguously.
Yeah.
Where it's not like, yep, you did everything right, kid. That was what I secretly meant. And if it was actually just like, no, God continues to be aloof, and this is all a sort of test, and you never, like, you never get positive feedback. You only get negative feedback in the form of apocalypses. And that's it. That's the way it's going to be. I don't know. So I don't want to, like, go off topic too much, because I think this is the topic, is like Aronofsky and his approach. But, like, Aronofsky is clearly interested with ideas of God and the nature of the universe.
Yeah.
With a particularly, like, Abrahamic sort of slant when I say God, where it's like, all the way back to Pi, we have this idea that the universe is understandable, and that the character has understood it. He's understood the secret pattern that lies within it, and he's understood the name of God, which is sort of like carrying a piece of God inside of him. And then this is also sort of like a curse that he can't handle, like, his body and mind can't handle this, and he maims himself to get rid of it, right? And it's like, God is this dangerous, like it's so powerful that it's basically poisonous to humans.
Yeah.
And that, I think there's shades of that in The Fountain too, in a different way. And I think that's also here. It's this sense of God as this, like, figure of terror, basically.
Yeah.
Which I think is just such a interesting and sort of refreshing and different way of looking at things.
It totally is. And that's part of why I love this movie so much, is because of just it's it wants to look at this thing. Okay, let me try to distill my overall problem with this thing. I think this movie either needs to just present this entire story as straightforward as possible, and then ultimately let you, the audience, walk away from the movie going, hey, that was pretty fucked up, actually, that happened. Or it needs to like dive into that idea within the context and the themes of the movie. And I feel like it doesn't really do either.
Yeah.
Or rather maybe tries to do both. Because I mean, like I keep wrestling with the end of the movie where, you know, like Noah has, like, again, the climax of this film is Noah holding up a knife to a newborn, and like he's about to do it and then can't in the end, thank God, or I guess not thank God. And then punishes himself. It turns the Noah gets drunk story into him kind of drowning his sorrows and punishing himself for what he perceives as his failure to follow the creator's will, only to be told by someone else like, no, actually, if you think about it, this was the creator's will, which maybe is the birth of us rationalizing behavior by deciding it's what God wanted us to do. Maybe that's actually what the story is. But like, and he's just like, okay, I'm okay now. And then the thing with Ham, so in the Bible, and this is because I think the problem with this whole thing is everyone knows these stories so well that we like automatically think of the actual biblical story versus what's being told here. Because like in the Bible, Ham is cursed after what happens with his father, right? Mm-hmm. Like the story of Noah getting drunk is that Noah gets really drunk, passes out naked. Ham sees his father naked and like goes in and is like, hey brothers, look, dad's naked. And the brothers are like, let's like clothe him and help him. and Noah's like, hey Ham, that was pretty fucked up that you just like looked at me and didn't help me and just went and got your brothers and said, hey look, dad's naked and drunk. So it's the curse of Canaan, because Ham's son Canaan is basically cursed to be a servant forever. And that like is him being cursed and then sent off, and that's the story. And so at this movie, Ham leaves just after the drunkenness of Noah, just like in the Bible. But like I'm unclear about how I should feel about that, because Ham is not sent off cursed by his father. Ham is, you know, his father killed the woman he loved, aka the first girl he met and knew for roughly 15 minutes. And he's mad at his dad for that, and so he can't stay anymore and then goes off on his own and somehow finds another woman, I guess, somehow.
Yeah.
So like, again, what do I feel about that? Because that's like, it's like sad that Ham is not part of the family anymore, I guess. But like, I'm bringing the biblical story into it because I know the biblical story, and I don't know if I should be, and that's where I feel conflicted on so much of this stuff.
Yeah, I think I basically, that's another failure of the movie, I guess, is I felt a bunch of things at different times, but I don't know that they were what I was supposed to be feeling. Mm-hmm. And I certainly didn't feel anything about any, like, I just didn't feel like Ham's story was very well dramatized at all.
And I thought it had the potential, because I really liked in the middle the idea of, Kubal Kane like sneaks aboard the ark, and like he's like hiding him and feeding him and like being corrupted by him. And I thought that was really cool and interesting. And then it just kind of resolves in the end with Ham just like deciding to stab Tubal Cain in the back. Just like, why'd you do that?
He turned good, as my kids would say. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's just a disappointing climax of like, he realized in the end that this guy was actually the bad guy. And my father, who, by the way, is after this moment immediately goes to grab a newborn and stab it, is actually the good one.
Right. Like I thought it was a missed opportunity. I'm glad you brought up that specific moment, because I was like, if the biblical story of Ham is that Ham is kind of a jerk, then make Ham a jerk. Like, make one of his sons be like, actually have a character flaw that isn't just, you know,
I want to fuck.
He doesn't want to die, and he would like to like have a normal life. Like that's his character flaw. He's well, and maybe in the terms of the story, it's like, well, he's insufficiently obedient.
Sure.
And then I think especially we as 21st century people are like, so what? Which admittedly was not like the reaction you're supposed to have. If you're living in some kind of ancient context where you're hearing this story, it's supposed to be a parable about the importance of obedience.
Yeah.
The whole thing is really like,
yep.
like Noah being obedient to God, Noah's sons being obedient to him. Like obedience is super important, like morally in this framework.
Yep.
Whereas nowadays it's like, I don't think obedience is even a good quality, like in and of itself. Like, like it has its place, I suppose.
Well, and that's what I mean by if the movie had just played it straight, it could then like extra textually almost be like, hey, isn't this fucked up?
Yeah.
But it doesn't ultimately. Like, cause like if obedience, Noah's final act is an act of disobedience, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, but again, because we don't know that this is literally what God's command was, is it an act of disobedience? Ultimately, Emma Watson argues no, that God gave you a choice, which makes sense. Man, I don't know. This is like, the more I think about this, the less I like it, but it's such a cool movie to watch in the moment.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I remember us when we finished Pi, we sort of were like, maybe we even had slightly different interpretations of what the ending of that movie actually was.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, that's cool because I kind of like your interpretation. I kind of like my interpretation, and they're like very different interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool. And it doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't leave me with a feeling of like lack of clarity or confusion. It's just like, hey, that's a different way to think about these themes. Whereas this left me just like, what are the themes?
Yeah.
I think this is where did we notice this recently that confused and frustrated me? I feel like this happened recently where I was like, it's fine for there to be ambiguity in storytelling. And in fact, there's a lot of storytelling with ambiguity that I really like. But when the ambiguity like makes it impossible to figure out like, wait, what was the thing we were saying here? Like what was...
Yeah, it was Castle Rock.
Castle Rock, the TV show Castle Rock that we watched recently, which by the way was a show I really enjoyed, and even the ending I enjoyed overall. It was just like a final note of that story where it was like, wait, or were we doing A or were we doing B? Because they're like mutually incompatible things to be doing. And I think that's kind of the same thing here, where it's like you have this story which basically is the story about how God is a huge jerk. And then at the very, very last minute, you're like, oh, God is smiling upon us. This is great. We did the right thing. We did what he actually secretly wanted the whole time. Even though if you just look at his actions, he was doing terrible things the whole time. So
yeah. I mean, like, I agree. Like if the lesson is God is a huge jerk, but also so are we. And we deserve what we got. I also like the biggest flaw with the flood story to me is that like we didn't get better.
Right.
Like humanity didn't like, and I think actually there's a shot in this movie that I really like where I think it's part of Noah telling the creation myth to his family, and he talks about the Cain and Abel murder, and there's like the way Aronofsky chooses to depict this moment as we see like, which is a repeating motif in the film, which is the I think probably like a rock tied to a stick or something, just like a hammer. I forget exactly how Cain murders Abel, but like we see that raise up into the sky and we see Cain strike Abel and fall. And then Aronofsky does this thing where he, with that kind of fast forward still thing you were talking about earlier, cuts through all of history and showing humankind like continuously murder and kill each other because that's what we do. I thought that was a really effective shot and I liked it a lot, but like in context of the film, it's like, okay, but that means that the flood didn't do anything. It's really fun to leave this movie with this like this beautiful green paradise that we've recreated for ourselves, and this small group of humanity is like, oh, we've got a second chance now, and we're going to do it right this time. And we in 2014 watching this movie are like, but we didn't though. And like, look, I love humanity. I think we have this great capacity for good. I agree with the movie's conclusion in that regard, right? But we also do really horrible things to each other constantly and consistently throughout all of humanity. So like the idea that like we fucked up real bad, the flood happened, we wiped the slate clean and started over, and everything was good again. We all know that that's not how it goes. Yeah. And that makes you lose something a little bit of the effect of the movie when you come out of it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I have kind of an idiosyncratic response to this, which is like, on the one hand, probably like super blasphemous from a dogmatic point of view, but I think is just like the straightforward interpretation of the Bible is that like God as a character in this, in this literary work undergoes character growth and change. And
yeah, that would be extremely blasphemous. You are correct.
But like, it's clearly just true because he starts out with this, he's like, all right, I'm going to make this, creation, and it's going to be awesome. And then I'm going to give creatures free will inside the creation. And then they immediately start doing stuff he doesn't like. And he's like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. Hold on. Okay. Let me like reset it with like the more obedient ones. And then the same thing happens again. And he's like, okay, I think the issue here is just like, if they're going to have free will, they're going to do stuff that is not what I would have told them to do, but maybe that can be okay. And then it gets to the point where like the whole religion changes and it becomes a religion of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And love and acceptance and like it becomes which requires that this like it's a perfect character arc, right?
I love calling Christianity God's character growth.
Yeah,
that's wonderful,
right? Like it's a character arc of a father, like a father having a child, and the child starts doing things, and it's like, God, the kid poured coffee all over my papers, and this is horrible. And then it's like you realize, like, okay, but like I need to let the kid be the kid and let the kid make their mistakes and still love and forgive them. Like that's like that's just what it is. I don't know why this isn't like, sometimes I feel crazy because I'm like, I've thought this has been obvious to me for a long time, but like no one ever says it. And I'm like, it's just clearly the story of a father's growth. That's what the Bible is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has to be like to make the incongruous version of God that is the Old Testament to the version of God that is New Testament. Like it just, they play as two essentially different gods. And if you want to declare those as the same God, which the Bible is saying that they are, then you need to have him change at some point. You just need to. It doesn't work. Although I will say that like the birth of Christianity is founded upon God sending his only son to live amongst mankind, and then only forgiving them through the brutal murder of his only son. So, still ain't perfect. Like, still, you think the all-powerful being would be like, hey, maybe my forgiveness doesn't have to go through this horrible sacrifice. Maybe.
Yeah. That's one element that I've never entirely understood. Like this has nothing to do with
I think the best
film,
thing you could do is just treat it as a fantasy where the only way to unlock mass forgiveness is through this specific sacrifice, and that is the sacrament that needs to occur to unlock this next phase of existence. So it's tragic and sad, but it's Jesus loves us. So there we go.
Yeah, right. I think I do get what it's supposed to be saying, but I agree with you where or at least like there's the idea there where it's like, well, you're God. Couldn't you have just said like, oh, okay, I forgive you?
No,
it doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Although that is indeed how it works now.
Yeah, true.
Depending on your religion. Ask for forgiveness, mean it sincerely. Yeah. Then you will be forgiven because God loves you. So And he's never going to do the flood again, Matt. He promised. No more floods.
No more floods. And yeah, that's character growth.
Well, because it didn't work. It didn't work.
It's so interesting. I mean, we've gone pretty far afield here, but like I always think it's interesting how like the there is like this doctrine which like really like smart seeming people will say where it's like God is infallible and all knowing and omniscient and all powerful, and it's like, did you read the book? Like the book contains him making mistakes and like getting angry.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's in the book. Like what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, ultimately, this was a book written by people, right? And so it's as flawed as the people writing it. Although some people would say it was written by people through God, and therefore it is perfect. But I don't subscribe to that personally. But yeah, the idea is that like, I mean, even the idea, the Adam and Eve story is like, well, if you knew everything, then you like knew they were gonna do it.
Right.
So like, why can you be mad about it?
Right. That's why I just like the interpretation where it's like, well, it's actually just that they gained an understanding of the nature of good and evil, whereas prior to that they were just like animals.
Although I will say, like, I think just the correct way of framing the Bible is a father and children story. I love this actually, because like, I mean, a perfect example of this is my son has been like incessantly like picking up rocks from his school playground and putting them in his pocket, and like bath time each night has become me taking his shorts off and finding like 20 rocks in his pockets. And it's like, I've told him every day that don't put rocks in your pocket, and I know he's gonna do it, and I'm still disappointed at the next day when I feel in his pockets and there's like a bunch more rocks in there. So I think it's essentially the same thing. It's like, I am telling you the correct ways to behave, but I am going to give you the leash to allow you to make those choices for yourself. And even though I know you're going to make the wrong decision because you're a 3-year-old, I am still a little disappointed in you when you do. Now, am I going to banish you from my house forever and punish your descendants and your descendants' descendants? No, I'm not going to do that. But, nobody's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've found in parenting that very often there are situations where you're just like, I genuinely don't know what the like right response is here. Like, I mean, that as sort of like mundane as that example is that you just gave, it's like, yeah, it's like, what's like the exactly right calibrated response to a situation like that? Because it's not, I don't think it's just like, oh, just, it doesn't matter at all, ignore it. It's like, well, that leads to a cycle of just, it's like, okay, where's the line where you stop ignoring it? And then, and then what's the proportionality there? And it's tricky. I get it. I understand.
This is a complete side note, but watching children learn honesty and deception and morality is one of the most fascinating things in the world, because my son is doing this thing where he really likes Chick-fil-A sauce, like a lot, and he'll want to dip everything in Chick-fil-A sauce. And we have a rule that he can only dip things in Chick-fil-A sauce. He cannot eat it with his fingers himself. It has to have like, you can have it, but you have to dip your chicken nugget in it. You can't just eat it by itself. And today he said to me, okay, Daddy, you give me more and I'm going to hunch down and eat it, and you won't be able to see. And I was like, he's going to do a thing that disobeys me, but he doesn't understand that telling me that he's going to do it, like, he doesn't understand how that's a bad move in the whole thing.
I'm going to go in the other room for unrelated reasons. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, he literally will tell me, like, he's in a room doing something I told him not to do, and he'll say, Daddy, go away, don't look, because I want to do this.
Yeah. It's great.
It's fascinating. This is what the Bible is God learning that we're just a bunch of toddlers that we'll do whatever we want.
We keep putting rocks in our pockets.
Yep.
Even after he's told us not to. Yeah.
It all makes sense in that perspective. Now, I mean, it's, again, I would say you're not going to win Father of the Year if you say, well, fine, I'm going to kill you all.
That's I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think you're not going to win Father of the Year if you do that.
But anyway, the movie Noah. This is kind of where I expected this conversation to eventually go, because I do think one of the enjoyable things about the movie is that it's inviting you to have these kind of perhaps deeper conversations about these biblical stories that, again, have been so kind of immediately ingrained, at least in you and I's like mindset, that like we don't even really think about it more broadly than just the fun story where, oh, it's two of every animal. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like there's anything that dislodges sort of the cache, like, yes, the Noah story. These are the thoughts you're supposed to have about that. I can recite them using my, knowledge of the Western canon. It's like, let's take it off of the shelf of the Western canon and kind of examine it. And like, I almost said modernize it just there. And it's like, it didn't really modernize it.
No,
it actually just took it seriously on its own merits. And I think it did sort of fall down in a couple places, as we discussed. But overall, I agree. It was stimulating. It was engaging. It was just too long, kind of boring. And
yeah, I wish it was half an hour shorter, which is, I mean, that's a lot of time, but I feel like this is Aronofsky's first film over 2 hours. It's like 2 hours and 16 minutes. Most of it, we talked about this earlier, that most of his other films slot into like the hour 45 range. And I think that's his sweet spot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, it's not like I think you could cut a whole part out of the movie, but I think you could just trim every section of the movie by like a little bit of time and it would work out better.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Again, we didn't need the big fight at the end. We just didn't need it. Like, it was cool seeing the rock guys turn back into angels, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of a cool moment, but not worth it. I just
didn't need to see them like carrying weapons. I mean, that's the weird thing about the, like, when like people are struggling to get on the ark and like Noah's fucking stabbing them with spears and swords and stuff. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't the whole thing, the reason these people are being punished is because they invented murder? And then like Noah's just like, yeah, fuck you, take this. Like, I really thought the way it was going to present it was like we were going to see him struggle with how to stop these people without killing them. And it's like, no, we're just gonna kill them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I also just, as much as I love the special effects overall, I thought the line of rock golems fighting the horde of humans, you're just kind of like, they would just go around, like they're not fast enough to, and yeah, it's kind of whatever.
It's a bit silly, and it didn't need it. I think the effect would have worked just as well if like the humans were like desperately sprinting towards the ark right when the waters hit. Which is kind of what happened, but we just had to put a battle in there before it.
Yeah, and it was just drawn out. Could have even been like a slightly quicker battle. Like I agree. I kind of love the idea of these fallen angels as characters. Something we didn't talk about at all, I guess, just briefly. Like the fallen angels are like angry at humans. They see the humans as like a mistake. Basically, they're like, these humans have let down God. They're the reason why everything sucks now. We came down to earth to try to help them because we pitied them, and then they're just awful, and then God shows them mercy and shows humanity mercy in this very specific way where it's like, gonna save just these people.
I mean, it's the irony of it is like they were cast down as fallen angels and turned to rock because they pitied humanity. And then God, years later is like, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait a minute. Didn't I get punished for this?
I mean, I think once again, that's like, you're being punished for disobedience, even though your heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
That's like the whole movie is like, yeah, I'm really mad at you for not doing what I said, even though the reason you did it is for basically good and understandable reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Like this story, and I think that the Old Testament writ large is the primary goal of that is obedience. It is obedience to God, obedience to family. Like, this is the goal of the book essentially.
Right.
And so, making a story about the merits of disobedience, which I think functions very well in 2014 because we are a society that does not value blind disobedience near as much as we used to. It doesn't mesh well with the origin of that story, and I think that leads to some of the confusion and uncertainty that we're feeling.
Yeah, I think so. Just because this is one of my, I don't know, interest areas. Do you put any stock in the idea that like the origin of a story like this is actually some cataclysmic flood that wiped out some huge area?
Almost certainly. Like
Yeah.
I think one thing that we know about early civilization is it all existed in floodplains, right? It was the most fertile ground, with most plants and animals were living there, and so if we're gonna stop and live somewhere, it's gonna be there. And floodplains are called that because they flood frequently. And so yeah, I mean, I think Abrahamic religion is not the only one with a flood myth, right? It's like this is a commonality throughout early civilization. And so it's like floods were a thing that they dealt with regularly,
right?
So it might make sense even that like a big cataclysmic flood didn't necessarily occur, but just like the fear of that was just very rampant in society because like they had, you know, big floods constantly that could really fuck things up. And so like your brain stretches out. It's like, what if there's like a really like the biggest flood ever that destroys all the land, right? I totally see that just extrapolating out in the minds of people.
Right. And they probably, I mean, floods probably killed just countless people because it's not like you had any kind of warning system. And if you were in the path of it, it's not like, oh, get the shelter. It's like, no, there's nothing. You're just dead. And yeah, I think that's quite plausible. Also, I think like one thing this is a bit pseudoscience-y maybe, but I think we've come to understand more over time that like there are more like mega floods than maybe we used to realize because like, you know, especially during the Ice Age or closer to the Ice Age when there were like giant glaciers, there would be like basically lakes sitting on top of the glaciers that would suddenly break containment, and then it would just basically be like a lake, you know, flooding out of this glacier onto the land, and it would just like scour everything away. I don't know. I just think this is interesting to think about as like what sort of emotional reaction do you have if you live in a world where that sort of thing has just happened and you want to pass this story on or like gain some kind of moral meaning from it. Like, why did this happen? Like, everyone I know is dead. Why? And then you try to like tell a story that allows you to live with that.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe that's what this story is.
I mean, so much of these stories are just, you know, people that don't understand the way the world works, trying to put a reason and understanding behind things they couldn't possibly understand. I mean, that's what all mythology does essentially, right? It's like here's this big event. What, this volcano is erupting. Why? What could possibly cause that? It must be some higher power is angry with me for something I did and I don't. Yeah, I mean, it all makes very logical sense. Like even just looking at how humanity operates today, right? It's just like something bad happens in our lives, and one of the first things we try to do is understand why that happened that way. What did I do? Like we want to understand. We want a reason. We want a narrative behind why that bad thing happened to me. So yeah, it just like it's very easy to look back and say, oh yeah, that's where these stories come from.
Yeah. Yep. I think you're right.
But good movie. I enjoyed it.
Me too. Probably.
I don't know where I'd rank it next to the other Aronofsky movies, and since I don't have to do that for another few weeks, I'm not gonna do it. But I liked it.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's not do that right now.
Yeah. So our next Aronofsky movie, Matt, is a movie called Mother, a movie that I did see in theaters and loved to death. I think I know you basically know nothing about that film, and I really want to keep it that way. So
I'm looking forward to watching it. I continue to know almost nothing about it.
Good. That's the best way to see it. It's the way I went into it. The only thing I knew about it going into it is that it got an F cinema score from the audience, which made me even more excited to see it.
Oh man, that's great.
And you'll see why in a few weeks.
All right.
Doof.
All right, Matt. Before we go for the week, though, we just had to talk about how, the entire film industry is collapsing around us. Kind of the impetus for this conversation for me was as I was going home from work today, I got a story that my local theater, I frequent the Alamo Drafthouse, or I did a lot before I had children, less now, but that's basically been my go-to theater is the Alamo Drafthouse. It's one of those, dine-in theaters. I really like their policy on talking and phones and things. I think they very strictly enforce that. They always have a really good track record of good projectors. They don't have the problems that some AMCs I've been to have, where they clearly need to change the projector bulb out. The movie is way darker than it should be. It's always been good. I've always enjoyed it. They're a franchisor. So the company that owns all the franchises in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that I live filed for bankruptcy today. All 5 theaters in my area immediately shut down. They're closed until further notice. The corporate office, Alamo Drafthouse Corporate, has said that they are committed to getting these theaters up and running in DFW again. Obviously, it's probably going to be under a new owner, a new franchisee rather. But that's kind of where we're at right now, where something like DFW is not a small market in the movie world, and a big player in that market has essentially ceased to exist overnight. And that's kind of where the industry is right now, where, you look at it's just the box office this year, man, it's really bad. It's historically bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. We've talked about this a bit over the years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel personally like a lot of this is that they no longer know how to advertise, and I don't even know what to tell them either. Like I'm like, oh, they just need to do this. But like all the movies that I've seen were like successfully advertised at me, and then you tell me, oh, this one movie did really bad, and I'm always like, well, I never heard of that. I didn't know it was out, and it's like it used to be that you would always know because it would be blasted at you every time you turn on the television, and that was a very easy and convenient way to market things. And maybe they just had a different marketing approach, but like now whatever they're doing is not working. I don't know that there is any way that can work. And I see this as being a fundamental center of the problem. I know this isn't necessarily like the only, cause, clearly, right? But this is the thing I just keep going back to every time we think about this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I guess, like, do you watch live television?
I don't watch live television. No.
Okay, and your YouTube subscription, you pay for premium, right? So you don't see any ads on YouTube,
right?
So, like, even if ads existed to these movies, there is no avenue in which they could be funneled to you.
Exactly. Like, I think maybe in some previous conversation, I'm just like, yeah, they need to figure it out. And actually now I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what they could possibly do, because you're right. Like the world is now such that I can just avoid being advertised at.
Yeah.
And that's really bad for movies, specifically, like for movies uniquely, because like if it's a product of some kind, there's maybe you'll get a pop-up or like a banner ad or whatever, or like when you're searching for things on Amazon, a related thing will pop out or whatever. Like I still feel like it's not that advertising doesn't work, period. It's that movies are a specific entertainment product that really relies on you knowing that it exists, when it's going to be there, and like making time to do that.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a whole conversation about Disneyland at some point, but I did want to just the immediate leap I wanted to make here is like that model can work. The model of like there's an event that you want to go to, and you need to plan for it. But the trick is to make that thing cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. and then and you make it good, and then people spread, knowledge about it by word of mouth, and people, then people will plan for it. Then people will go out of their way to go to it, and they'll give you enough money to make it balance out, to balance the scales. But movies are just like this transient, like evanescent thing that's in the theater for 5 minutes, and if you miss it, you miss it, and it doesn't it just doesn't function if you can't advertise it like in a very like big, overwhelming way,
Yeah. I mean, I agree. You have to create a story for why someone needs to come right now to see this thing.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing about that is like you can do that in movies. Like the thing we were talking about this time last year, or perhaps like 13 months ago, or I guess 11 months ago, whatever, was Barbenheimer, was this kind of once in a lifetime phenomenon that was like these two movies hit on the exact same weekend, and it became a cultural event to where everyone had to go see these on opening weekend because you had to be part of the Barbenheimer conversation. And that's like, we talked about this after the fact when we were talking about the summer last year of like, how did that happen? Like, was that a conscious marketing move? I mean, sort of, but I also, they just marketed it traditionally, and then something caught fire with people and it became a thing. And it's just like, they can't repeat that naturally. They've tried, it's not going to work that way. But it's like, I kind of feel bad for these, I kind of feel bad for these $1 billion studios, because like, I don't know what to do either. Like, I agree with you. The problem is, I feel like the problem is always marketing. When you're trying to get someone to buy something and they're not buying it, it's like the product hasn't changed. It's your ability to sell the product to a person that's changed. And the person you're trying to sell the product to has changed.
Yeah.
With streaming and with the 100 other distractions that we have now, like that sale is harder than it ever has been. And it's very clear that, yeah, just throwing a trailer on the internet is not enough to do that anymore. Like, I mean, like the most recent example is like Furiosa came out a couple weeks ago, sequel to a very, very well liked Mad Max movie, Mad Max Fury Road did not do like amazing, but it did good enough, obviously, to get a sequel. And no one cared about that movie. Nobody cared.
So I had a thought about this though, like, and this, again, this is sort of maybe overly narrow because it's just like me reacting to things that I've heard. But like, you take Mad Max Fury Road, everyone not only loved it, but everyone walked away from it and told 7 people that was an amazing movie. That was the best movie I've seen in years, possibly. Gotta go see Mad Max Fury Road. And then that movie did super well because of that. Like, not 100% because of that, but largely because of word of mouth.
Yeah.
Another example of this would be Top Gun Maverick, where it's like,
yes,
it's like they marketed it traditionally, basically. And then everyone who saw it told everyone they knew that it was awesome and it was the best movie forever. And it exactly the same pattern. But like, nobody said that about Furiosa. Like on the podcasts I've listened to, it was all this sort of like, oh yeah, like it was really, like it wasn't as good as Mad Max Fury Road, but like I liked it. And like immediately you feel your excitement just shrivel up when you hear people talk about a thing like that, because you're just like, well, why the hell would I go to the theater for something that you just damned with faint praise?
Yeah. I mean, the problem of the theater industry is that phrase right there. Why the hell would I go to the theater? Because like what advertising used to be was, you person are going to be going to the theater this weekend. My goal is to get you to see my movie and not another movie. And now the role of advertising in movie theaters is, I am desperately trying to get you to come to the theater at all. And that is a completely different equation. It's a completely different sell. And yeah, I mean, a just okay movie is not going to do that.
Yeah.
And also like part of this is the streaming window thing, right? Like the Fall Guy movie that like came out of, I think it was South by Southwest, like people saying like this is the best action film ever made. It's like this is what movies are made for. By the way, I saw it and it's fine. It was on streaming 17 days after its theatrical release. 17 days. So even if you get word of mouth, which by the way, that movie has good word of mouth. People are leaving the theater and liking it, and it's like it's week to week drops are like some of the lowest week to week drops that have happened this year. Even after it's been put on streaming. But like for all the people that are kind of on the fence, the idea that in 2 weeks you can sit in your house on your 65-inch television and spend $20 to rent this movie versus going out to the theater and spending $50 for you and your family. Like that's not even a question.
Yeah.
So like, and that is the type of movie that's a big explosive action movie that like would be better observed on a theater, and you can try to make that sell to a person is like, this is an experience. You need to see it in the theater. Same with Furiosa. I think I haven't seen it, but I am part of the problem there. I haven't seen it yet, but I don't know. I just feel like this is like at some point we just have to be like, oh, we just can't make movies like this anymore. Like it's just like the industry no longer supports a thing like this. Like I think the movie we just talked about for an hour, Noah, is a perfect example of this. Movie cost $125 million to make. It made, even on poor reviews, it made $360 million worldwide. That's enough to make a profit. It made money.
Yeah.
That would not happen.
No.
Like if you released Noah in 2024, it would be one of the worst bombs in the history of film.
Yeah.
So like I think like we have this weird dichotomy where either your movie has to be a huge tentpole thing. Like I think Deadpool is going to end up making pretty good money, or it has to be like super cheap. Like like you need to be releasing a movie for under $50 million if you want to make any money.
Yeah, I agree. I'm still processing actually what you said a second ago about like it used to be just everyone would go to the movie theater every weekend, and it was just I'm trying to get you to see my movie instead of that guy's movie. Mm-hmm. That's 100% right, and that I almost want to revise I still think the advertising issue is a huge change. Like the world is different in this way that you just cannot advertise the way that you used to. But also, like I remember being a teenager in high school, and me and my friends, like just going to see a movie was just a very common thing for us to do. Like, even if it didn't even have to be something where it was like one of the friends was super psyched to see it, like which did sometimes it was like, oh, Lord of the Rings is coming out. Yeah, we're all going to go see Lord of the Rings. But sometimes it was The Transporter. And we would go see The Transporter, not because we expected it to be the best thing, or like, we had a debate about like, how are we going to spend our day? It was just like, it's 2001. Everything is boring. We're either going to stay at home and play Halo again, or we, and chat on AOL Instant Messenger, or we're going to go to a movie. Or we're going to just like walk aimlessly around the mall. Like it was a very different world. And I try to imagine my kids, they're not teenagers yet, but one of them is getting real close and starting to sort of exhibit the same sorts of behaviors. And I'm like, it's really hard for me to imagine her frequently wanting to go to the movie theater with her friends.
Yeah.
Like that's maybe sometimes, sure, for some particular movies.
Yeah.
It's not the way we did.
There will be an occasion where a movie will push through and become culturally significant to the point where you feel that need and pull. But for the most part, I agree. No. Just and this is a bummer to me, and I think it's bad for the art form because, like, I think it's okay when a movie is just good, right? Like, Like, it's okay to make a movie that's just good. And like the pressure, I think, for a studio where it's like every movie has to be great because the thing we're relying on is not our marketing but word of mouth. So it has to be all-time great. Where a movie like Noah, I mean, this is a perfect conversation to have this week because that Noah is just good. It's just a good movie. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's just pretty good.
Yeah.
And like I think pretty good things need to exist in this art form. Like you don't always want to watch like the best version of I don't always want to see Citizen Kane. Sometimes I just want to see something, hey, that was good.
Yeah.
I like that. That was good.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think we used to have just lower expectations and it was just, it was fine.
Yeah.
If you would I don't know. It's very funny to think back actually, because you ever go to movies with people where you walk out of the movie with them and they don't want to talk about it?
Yeah.
I find that
weird. I never know what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, like you and I are the opposite of that person, obviously. But I've always thought it was interesting, and I try not to be judgmental, even though that's like just so far away from the person that I am, because I look at that and I'm just like, what are you getting out of this? And again, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just like, because like half of my enjoyment of the movie is talking about it afterward. So like, was that a good use of your time to do? And maybe it was like, maybe they just wanted it 2 hours of watching a thing happen. And then that's it. I don't know. But like that was now it's like every movie has to justify itself.
Yeah. And you can feel that sometimes in watching the movie, or even just like watching what movies are made and how movies are marketed. That it's like I kind of feel the desperation sometimes.
Yeah.
In just how the movie's marketed and how it's being talked about. It's like that only hurts it in the end, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sad. Like there's part of me that's sad, but there's part of me that also just realizes that like movies are never just going to stop existing. Like this is not a thing that's just going to go away. It's just going to change the type of movies that are made and how we receive them. Like it's just going to change. And I think ultimately like there's still going to be more movies made in a year than I will ever be able to see. And some of them will be really, really great. Some of them will be good and some will be quite bad. I don't think that's going away. I just think it's going to shift. And it's hard not to be doom and gloom about this stuff when you see things like Furiosa just like not even just bomb, but like be met with such complete disinterest from people. Like, and I think part of it's just like if you're a movie fan, you've been eating good for your entire life, basically. That like this idea of this central idea of movies are the center of pop culture is like a thing that's like you can feel good about. It's like the thing that I love is the most important thing in culture, and it's just not that way anymore. And it sure takes some adjustment to that, but ultimately I don't think we need to be too doom and gloom about it.
Yeah. I think my main source of not doom and gloom is just like it's in theory cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to make a better and better and better movie. In theory, although in practice that's not how it's gone. I think that is not necessary. I think that's not necessary. I think that it's some of the best things that I've seen recently weren't necessarily expensive at all to film, right? So
no, I think there's going to be an adjustment. I think like Pixar is a perfect example of this, that have been operating in these massive budget movies for a while, because for the longest time a Pixar movie was just like guaranteed $1 billion. Like you release a Pixar movie, it's going to make $1 billion. We know this, we're good, we're fine with it, cool. That's not the case anymore. They're going to have to adjust. The whole industry is going to have to adjust. And like it's unfortunate that like I think just how the budgeting structure is done is going to have to shift. Like I think we've seen actor salaries increase exponentially, and like while at the same time like budget for like it's ironic that budget for VFX has never been higher, but also like VFX studios have never been more overworked and expected to produce stuff for as cheap as possible in existence.
Mhm.
Like that, I think that's ironic in that. But I mean, like the $125 million movie just like needs to go away. Like it just, I don't think the industry supports that anymore, except for maybe a handful of movies a year. Like I don't know. I'm really interested to see how Inside Out 2 does, because this is a sequel to a very successful $1 billion Pixar movie. And it could do very well. I'm trying to look up the budget for what Inside Out 2 was, and I'm not seeing any information. But
so if it helps, like that's a movie where my kids have like independently and without even there being a relevant context been like, can we go see Inside Out 2?
Yeah.
Which I see as being a really good sign. And that's the word of mouth that we're talking about. And that's kind of how things used to be, where like you could sort of bank on a franchise being like, well, your franchise sort of substitutes for word of mouth, because it's like, well, I saw the other one was good. And I think we all collectively lost our sense of that as being reliable, because they milked it too hard, and they realized like, well, let's just make every movie part of the franchise. Every single movie ever is part of the same franchise. And then you're just like, okay, we're not gonna do this.
Yeah. I mean, there was this really interesting time period where like we would greenlight everything and anything, and like the idea, like I think Pixar went through this really interesting period where like they allowed a lot of directors to tell stories that were like very personal to them. Like I think this was a news headline this week that was like, going forward, Pixar is going to start working on stories that are more broadly appealing and less specific. And like people hear that news and it's like doom and gloom. It's like, oh my God, that's the death of the art form. But also like, I think I don't want to say I agree with the decision, but I just think it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
Like I thought Turning Red was a good movie, but like it was a very specific experience.
Yeah.
And it's not that the general audiences can't like glean something out of that, but like if you look at Elemental, a movie we both kind of liked, right? But that is very specific immigrant experience movie, whereas like Inside Out is like, what does it feel like to grow up?
Yeah.
Which is like everyone's immediately like, yes, got it. And like Toy Story is like, what does it feel like to feel like you're being replaced? Which is like, yep, got it. There, I'm with you. Like these are like incredibly broad universal human experiences where it's not that there's not value in a story about the experience of being an immigrant in a new place. There's certainly value in that story, and I think it should be told, but perhaps that is a thing that doesn't need to be made for $150 million, because you kind of know by definition that is not as broadly appealing and will not attract as broad of an audience.
Yeah. I basically agree. I mean, if you're it's just simple like logic and basic economics that you've kind of got to be reasonable about your expectations based on like what do you think you can get, like who's interested in this, who's this for. Trying to figure out, I'm trying to disprove a hypothesis of mine, but before I open my mouth, like I think, yeah, like I think, I don't know. I guess this contradicts the point I wanted to make, actually, because I was going to say like, I really love Luca. Like Luca to me is just such a beautiful movie, and it actually felt like a pretty general movie, but just like I never like heard. I think this is like one more example for my marketing is important thesis is I never heard about Luca, and then like months after it came out, like somebody was like, you should watch Luca, and I'm literally like, what's Luca? And it's like it's $150 million Pixar film. Like how do you not know? And yeah, and then I saw it and I loved it. I love Luca. It's one of my favorite Pixar movies, like bar none.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see it in theaters because I didn't even know it existed.
Well, to be fair, Luca came out mid-pandemic, so
true.
It was, I think it was one of the ones that they released only on Disney Plus.
Okay.
Which also, I mean, in this conversation, like the choice to release a lot of stuff on streamers during the pandemic made sense in the moment, but also I think trained audiences that
Yeah.
certain films don't need to be seen in the theater.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And you realize like, hey, this is kind of nice. And then maybe you invest in like a nicer movie watching setup at home. And then,
Yeah.
Yeah,
for me, as the father of a newborn at the time, it was very nice that like
Yeah.
in 2021, all Warner Brothers films went directly to Max.
Mhm.
I ate good that year because I got to see every new Warner Brothers film the weekend it came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think ultimately had an effect on people's understanding of what movies should be seen where. Yeah.
Yeah, like I honestly feel like maybe Luca would have been more successful, like much more successful if it hadn't
It
been.
might have been. I mean, that was one that I think was, I think there's a sweet spot between making this incredibly specific personal story to the director and making something broadly appealing. Like, I think the best stories are specific and broad at the same time. Like, in their specificity, you reach a certain universal truth. And I think Luca achieves that. Like, this is a movie specifically about this place, this Italian place, and this director growing up there, but it's also broadly about like a child feeling like their parents are trapping them and keeping them from things, and kind of learning to discover the world.
Yeah.
And the good parts and the dangerous parts of it, and it's not to say movies like Turning Red and Elemental and these very hyper specific things don't have any kind of that broad stuff. I think they do, but I think that it's successful to varying degrees. And again, like this isn't even about the quality of the movie. Sometimes it's just about like what it looks like to an outside observer, and in getting them to want to click the play button or go to the theater or what have you.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, part of marketing, and I kind of wanted to talk about this earlier when we were talking about advertising and marketing, is like you've got to have an appealing story. Like, it's not just a matter of like I'm going to cram the movie down your throat with like volume. It's like you have to have a good trailer. I mean, this is a totally separate line of argument, really, but like I just think trailers these days are bad. And I don't even necessarily have like, oh, this is what they should be doing. It's and I don't even know if it's necessarily true that trailers used to be good. I just think they're bad now. And they're bad in a way where I'm just like they're triggering some kind of allergic reaction in me, some kind of like reflexive, like I see what you're doing. Like you're like just I don't know. Maybe this is just like I'm old and I have seen too many trailers, and so I see what they're doing. It no longer works on me because I see through it. But like I remember, like I used to get excited about a trailer, and it hasn't happened to me in years. And again, could be just I'm old now, but it could also be I'm open to the idea that it's actually just that they don't know how to make people excited anymore. Or they don't know how to frame it in a story. Like, because a good trailer is a story, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, very true. Very true. I will say the exception to that. I don't know if you've seen it yet. The Alien Romulus trailer came out this week. Looks pretty good, man.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good.
I did. I like that trailer, you know?
Yeah.
I actually liked the Furiosa trailer. Like, while we're at it, like I liked the Furiosa trailer. I thought it was good. Good trailer.
Yeah, it's certainly not the case across the board, but I generally agree with you about this. Like, I am pretty excited for Inside Out. I don't think I've enjoyed any of the Inside Out trailers I've seen. I don't think they've done a good job of selling me on that movie. I think just the movie has the advantage of Inside Out was one of my favorite Pixar movies. I loved it. I thought it was a masterpiece, and I'm going to be in on this no matter what. And maybe a lot of this, Matt, is that's been the general sentiment for a lot of these franchise things, and why the franchise things are failing is they've been operating with the kind of assumption that we know you're going to see it. So we don't have to spend a lot of time crafting the trailer. Just like throw images from the movie up, say it's the next Marvel movie, and bam, we've got you already. And that's just not the case anymore at all.
Yeah, right. I mean, I along the lines of something you said a second ago, like I think they cleverly noticed that they could get people into like the ecosystem of like, oh, you will go see more of this kind of movie because it is part of a franchise, and thus you feel some level of buy-in, and but then they like over milked it, and now we're actually kind of gun shy. Like we're like, I feel tricked. Like I feel like you have exploited and manipulated me.
Yeah.
Especially lately, ever since the end of whatever phase of the Marvel universe was the one that everyone agreed was good. And then it was like, oh, you're just milking me now. And it's really obvious, and it sucks, and it's undignified. It reduces all of our dignity that you're doing this to us.
Yeah. My basic assumption for a Marvel movie now is that I don't want to see it. And therefore your trailer now has to do the job of convincing me that no, you do actually.
Yeah. Right.
But by the way, in that regard, I think the Deadpool trailer sucks. Uh-huh. Like I'm gonna see it, but they're basically running with the operation of like, you like Hugh Jackman. Uh-huh. I know you like Hugh Jackman, so I know you're gonna come see Hugh Jackman being Wolverine again, and like maybe they are right with that, but I do think the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer kind of sucks.
Yeah, I totally agree that it's. I'm not excited about it. I mean, I think that's the simplest way of saying it is. You just watch it, and then you're like, okay, do I now feel excited about going to see this? And the answer is so often no. In fact, I feel less excited than before I watched the trailer, which is like pretty bad.
Yep. I guess we've successfully now solved the movie industry. Here's the Doof Media 3 notes for success in the theater industry. Make your movie costs less than $50 million. Make it good. Cut a good trailer.
Yeah,
that's all you got to do.
I'm also just going to throw in something we didn't talk about, but just make it 90 minutes.
Oh yeah. I think maybe that's implied in the under $50 million because you make it cheaper by making it shorter.
Right.
That's just how math works.
Right. It's also implied in this is a Doof Media recommendation because
Yeah. All right. So when we start our movie company, we got to make it good. 90 minutes.
Yep.
Under $50 million, which I think that one will not be a problem for us.
Yeah. Think I can manage.
And then, cut a good trailer.
Yeah. Awesome.
And we win all the awards. We get all the money. And we take over the universe.
Yeah.
And we wipe it out with a big flood because fuck those people.
Because they did the wrong thing.
Yeah. They didn't come see our movie.
Yep.
Wrong choice.
Yep.
All right. We solved it. I'm so happy. Good job.
Too. Yeah.
Good job. I hope you're listening, studio executives.
I'm sure they are.
Someone should send this to them just so they see it.
Yeah. Them. Yeah. Right.
I don't know why spend less money to make movies is not a easily digestible thing for a corporation. It seems like they would be pretty in agreement with that. Just generally.
I mean, I think I don't know this. I mean, so to refer to like obviously that's correct to like the level of like that's how a business should operate. But I think it's like that basically means that you're shrinking the size of your business, which they probably don't want to do. So think about it in terms of like being a publicly traded company, and you're basically saying we're gonna make. Like, imagine it's a car company, and you're like, all right, instead of making really nice cars that cost $20,000, we're saying really nice cars. Let's say it costs $40,000 to make.
I wish my car cost $20,000.
They cost $40,000 to make, and then we sell them for $50,000, and we make 20% profit, and everything is nice. That doesn't work anymore. Nobody wants to buy a car for that much. So now we're going to be making cars for $10,000 and selling them for $12,000. And it's like, that's, you have just made your business much smaller, and you have like changed what your business is in a sense. And that's kind of what I think maybe some of these studios are either resisting that change, or like they kind of know that change would just cause their stock price to crater and possibly ruin them.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, it's like I was listening to a sports podcast talking about how basically every NFL player wants them to reduce the number of games they play in a season, but the NFL is definitely about to increase the number of games they're going to play in a season.
Interesting.
Because like telling an NFL owner make less money this year is not an equation that they operate under. But I mean, that's with the assumption that every NFL game is going to sell out no matter how many you have, which is generally true right now, that every game will sell out. That's not true with theaters and movies. And so it's like, I mean, I guess it's just a matter of, I mean, I think you're generally right that it's like the business has been structured this way for so long that sitting on the sidelines and just saying, just structure it differently is not an easy thing to do. It's just like, we're built with a certain amount of budget and a certain amount of expected returns. And if we scale all that down, like suddenly everything changes.
Yeah.
Like
right.
Even if a $50 million movie like makes $350 million, like that still ultimately is it just completely changes our business model, because like you need to either produce more movies if you want the same like gross, you need to produce more, or like completely scale down. Like you're totally right. You would need to scale down. Like it's telling a theater company, it's like telling AMC close half your theaters, right? And it's like that might make logical business sense, but nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to say, okay, I'm just going to reduce the size of my entire business by half.
Exactly. And I mean, if you think about it in terms of, you know, the painful actual sacrifices, it's like you're paying like 1/3 as many people.
Yeah.
Like 1/3 as many people are employed. And because it's not just like, oh, you know, you're not going to be able to pay the big time actors as much. It's like, no, you're just going to cut everything. Like, like the industry itself will shrink. There will be a massive unemployment wave. Which will not reverse. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. Of course, you're right. Well said. It's going to happen eventually, but it is not quite as easy as just start doing it tomorrow.
Well, I think what may happen is that some small, some currently cheap kind of shoestring studio may be super successful at operating cheaply and maybe become sort of dominant at doing that, and the big studios may kind of dry up. Is one possibility.
I mean, you want to know what that studio is?
What?
A24. A successful small independent studio that has always made pretty cheap movies that have always been like critically successful and never been like box office like smash successes, but have always done pretty well. This year they released their biggest movie yet, which was Civil War, the Alex Garland film, which I know you haven't seen, but you need to, and we will talk about it when you do. It's really, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was their most expensive movie they've ever produced at $50 million.
Okay.
And it brought in 115 worldwide. So it definitely made money.
There we go.
So yeah, it's not as if these things can't exist, but I think you're right. It's not going to be able to come. You're not going to be able to go to like the Warner Brothers and the Disneys and just go, okay, just don't make 20 $150 million movies anymore.
Yeah.
It's like,
right.
Well, okay, we'd have to completely rejigger our entire operation.
Yeah, I think I'll save this conversation for some later week, but there's also the fact that like Disney specifically just views themselves as an amusement park company that happens to make movies. I suspect. So, you know, they can just fund these advertisements for their amusement parks, which is what their films are.
Yeah, but the amusement parks aren't doing that well right now, man. It's not. Disney's in a bad spot. I don't know what they're gonna do.
Okay. I see what I was, we can go into more detail on this later. I think my impression was that things had bounced back quite a bit since COVID, but maybe they're still struggling and I'm off base.
They did. And then they did. So Yeah, we'll talk about this later. When we talk about the Star Wars hotel, because of course you've watched Jenny Nicholson's 4-hour video on that, haven't you?
I'm only halfway through it, Scott. I'm sorry.
2 hours. 2 hours into that and you're only halfway through. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, that's for another date, though. Actually, that is going to be our next episode, which will not be next week. Actually, that will be our episode 2 weeks from now, because for those that don't follow our other podcast, Kingslingers, next week is a pretty big deal for us. We are going to be going to Bangor, Maine, where we'll be doing a live recording of Kingslingers in front of a studio audience. Holy shit. That's pretty big. So we're not going to have this episode next week because I'll be flying out Thursday morning to get ready for that. And it's going to be a whole big thing. But we will be back the week after that. And we're going to talk about Disneyland a little bit, because Matt, where Matt was last week, was at the most magical place on earth. I
was at the magical place and had some thoughts, and they factor into this conversation we just had. So we'll just kind of call that part 2.
Sounds good. But that's all we have for part 1. If you have any opinions on Noah, on Darren Aronofsky, or on this whole messy movie theater industry we talked about today, feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on X at doofmedia.
That's right. And if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on any of the major podcasting platforms and YouTube for that matter.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and pledge at any of the available levels. We've got a bunch of bonus content going on. We mentioned the show Castle Rock briefly during this episode, and we do a bonus podcast talking about Castle Rock. So you should head on over to patreon.com and check that out. You should head to doofmedia.myshopify.com, where you will find a bunch of merch for just general doofdom, and also specific to some of our other shows, Kingslingers specifically. So but not just that, we have some Our Mom Critiques Wildbow merch on there, and more coming every day. So check that out, doofmedia.myshopify.com.
That's right. Also, please consider tossing us a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks. Once again, we will be off next week. Hope you guys have a good week. We will be having fun up in Bangor if any of you are going to be there. Can't wait to meet y'all. But for the rest of you, we'll see you in a couple weeks to talk about Star Wars again. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.